You don't talk to Julian Thorne like that. Nobody does. He's the man who bankrupted 3 competitors before breakfast and owns half the skyline of Manhattan. So, when a trembling waitress at the city's most exclusive restaurant interrupted his tirade with 7 words that froze the entire room, "Shout at me again and I'll end this conversation," everyone expected her to be fired, or worse. But what the billionaire did next didn't just shock the patrons. It uncovered a 20-year-old secret that would bring an empire to its knees. You think you know where this is going. You have no idea. Stay tuned, because this is the story of the night the power balance shifted forever. The silence inside L'Obsidian was usually something you paid for. It was a heavy, velvet silence, smelling of truffle oil, aged mahogany, and old money. It was the kind of silence where a dropped fork sounded like a gunshot. But tonight, that silence was being shredded by the voice of Julian Thorne. Elena adjusted the collar of her uniform, her fingers trembling slightly. She had been working at L'Obsidian for 6 months, barely keeping her head above water with the rent on her tiny apartment in Queens and the crushing weight of her student loans. She knew the rules. Be invisible. Be efficient. Be deaf to the conversations of the elite. But Julian Thorne made it impossible to be deaf. He was sitting at table 1, the power booth tucked in the back corner, reserved for royalty and men who thought they were gods. Thorne was the latter. He was handsome in a predatory way, with silver-streaked hair and eyes like chipped flint. Opposite him sat a younger man, sweating profusely in a suit that cost more than Eleanor made in a year. "I don't care about the regulatory hold-ups, Marcus," Thorne roared, slamming his hand on the table. The crystal wine glasses jumped. "I told you to bury the Peterson file. Bury it. If the SEC gets wind of the lithium deal before the acquisition is finalized, I will personally ensure you never work in finance again. I will have you managing a toll booth in Jersey." Elena approached cautiously, the heavy bottle of Chateau Margaux, 1996, cradled in her arm. She waited for a break in the shouting to refill the glasses. It was standard protocol. Keep the wine flowing, keep the temper manageable. She stepped into the blast zone. "More wine, Mr. Thorne." Julian whipped his head around, his eyes wild with rage. He didn't just look at her, he looked through her. He saw an obstacle, a gnat. "Do I look like I want more wine?" He spat, his voice dripping with venom. "I am in the middle of saving a $4 billion merger, and you're hovering over me like a vulture. Get away from the table." Elena took a step back, clutching the bottle against her chest. "I apologize, sir. I just thought—" "You thought? You're not paid to think." Julian stood up, his chair screeching against the floor. The entire restaurant went dead silent. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The ambient jazz music seemed to vanish. Julian loomed over her, pointing a finger inches from her nose. "You are paid to pour liquid into a glass and disappear. You are the help. You are nothing. Now get out of my sight before I have your manager throw you out on the street." Elena felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She saw Henri, the floor manager, rushing toward them from the maitre d' stand, his face pale with panic. She saw the pitying looks from the other tables, the socialites and the senators pretending to look away while soaking up the drama. She looked at Julian Thorne. She saw the arrogance, the cruelty, the absolute certainty that he could treat a human being like garbage because his bank account had 9 zeros. Something inside Elena snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet click of a lock turning. She didn't retreat. She didn't apologize again. Instead, she set the $2,000 bottle of wine down on the table with a deliberate, heavy thud. She stood up straight, smoothing her apron, and looked Julian Thorne dead in the eye. "Shout at me again," she said, her voice low but carrying through the silent room like a bell. "And I will end this conversation. Henri, the manager, froze 10 feet away. The man named Marcus looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Julian Thorne blinked. For the first time all night, he was speechless. "Excuse me?" Julian whispered, the danger in his voice rising. "You heard me," Elena said, her voice gaining strength. "I am serving you dinner, Mr. Thorne. I am not your punching bag. I don't care if you're buying the city or selling it. You will speak to me with respect, or you will pour your own wine." Henri finally reached the table, breathless. "Mr. Thorne, I am so terribly sorry. She is new. She is... Elena, leave immediately. You're fired. Get out." Henri reached for Elena's arm, but Julian held up a hand. "Stop." Julian didn't look at Henri. He was still staring at Elena, studying her face as if she were a complex mathematical equation he couldn't quite solve. The rage in his eyes had shifted into something else. Curiosity, amusement, or something darker. "You're warning me?" Julian asked softly. "A waitress is giving an ultimatum to Julian Thorne?" "I'm giving an ultimatum to a man who has forgotten his manners," Elena replied, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She knew she was fired. She knew she wouldn't make rent. But at that moment, she didn't care. Julian stared at her for 5 long seconds. Then, a slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. He turned to Marcus, the sweating man opposite him. "Get out." Marcus blinked. "Julian? Get out, Marcus? You're fired. You don't have the spine for this deal anyway. You let me walk all over you for 2 hours. This girl stood up to me in 2 minutes. "But the merger," Marcus stammered. "Leave!" Julian barked. Marcus scrambled up, gathered his briefcase, and practically ran out of the restaurant. Julian turned back to Elena. He gestured to the empty velvet seat opposite him. "Sit down, Elena." "Sir?" Henri squeaked. "I said, sit down," Julian commanded, his eyes locked on hers. "Henri, bring another glass. The lady is dining with me tonight." Elena sat. The plush velvet booth felt alien against her cheap polyester uniform. She felt the eyes of the entire room boring into her back. At the table to their left, Senator Billings was whispering frantically to his mistress. Henri, hands trembling, placed a crystal glass in front of Elena and poured the Chateau Margaux. He shot Elena a look that promised murder before scurrying away. "Drink," Julian said, raising his own glass. Elena didn't touch it. "I'm on the clock, Mr. Thorne. Technically, I'm fired." "You're not fired until I say you're fired, and I own the building, so I outrank Henri." Julian took a sip, savoring the wine. "You have a sharp tongue. Who are you?" "I'm nobody," Elena said defensively. "Just someone trying to pay rent." "Nobody speaks like you did, unless they have nothing to lose or everything to hide," Julian countered. He leaned in, his predatory gaze analyzing her. "I need a replacement for Marcus. Tonight." Elena laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I'm a waitress, Mr. Thorne. I don't know anything about mergers or lithium deals." "Don't lie to me," Julian snapped, though his tone was less angry now, more calculating. "I saw your eyes when I mentioned the Peterson file. You flinched. You know what that is." Elena froze. She had hoped he hadn't noticed. "I read the papers," she said carefully. "Arthur Peterson was the CEO of Vanguard Logistics. He committed suicide 3 years ago after being accused of embezzlement." "Correction," Julian said, swirling his wine. "He was framed for embezzlement. By me. Or at least, that's what the rumors say." Elena's hands clenched into fists under the table. She knew the rumors. She knew them better than anyone. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because tonight I have a meeting with Arthur Peterson's silent partner, a man named Silas Vance. Do you know the name?" Elena's breath hitched. Silas Vance, the butcher of Wall Street, a man so private that no photo of him had been published in a decade. "I've heard the name," she said. "Vance is coming here in 20 minutes, Julian said, checking his platinum Patek Philippe watch. "He holds the key to the lithium rights in Nevada. If I get those rights, Thorn Enterprises triples in value. If I don't, my creditors will tear me apart by Monday morning. I am leveraged to the hilt, Elena. I am standing on a cliff edge." It was a stunning admission. The invincible Julian Thorn was admitting vulnerability to a waitress he had just met. "Why tell me?" Because Marcus was a sycophant, he would have agreed with everything Vance said. Vance eats yes-men for breakfast. I need someone who isn't afraid to be rude. Someone who can look a shark in the eye and tell him to go to hell. Julian smiled. "Someone like you? You want me to negotiate a billion-dollar deal? No, I will do the negotiating. I want you to be my intuition. I want you to sit there, drink this expensive wine, and watch Vance. He has a tell. Everyone has a tell when they are lying. I need you to find it. And if I do, I will give you a check for $500,000. Tonight." The number hung in the air. $500,000. It was enough to pay off her loans, move her mother into a better facility, and restart her life. It was freedom. "And if I fail?" Elena asked. "Then I lose everything, and you go back to pouring soup for tips." Elena looked at the wine glass. She thought about the stack of final notice bills on her kitchen counter. She thought about the secret she had been keeping for 3 years, the reason she had dropped out of Yale Law, the reason she was working here in the first place. She wasn't just a waitress. She was Eleanor Peterson, Arthur Peterson's daughter. She had changed her name after the scandal, after her father jumped from the George Washington Bridge. She had spent 3 years hating Julian Thorn, blaming him for destroying her family. She had taken this job at L'Obsidian specifically because she knew he dined here. She had been waiting for a moment to hurt him, and now he was handing her the weapon. If she helped him, she got the money. But if she sabotaged him, if she fed him the wrong information during the meeting with Vance, she could destroy Julian Thorn once and for all. She could finish what her father started. Elena picked up the glass of wine. She looked Julian in the eye. "I'll do it," she said. "Good," Julian said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, sleek earpiece. "Put this in. I need to be able to hear you, and you need to hear what my analysts are feeding me. But remember, Elena, Vance is dangerous. He doesn't just ruin reputations, he makes people disappear. If he figures out you're playing a game, we are both dead." Eleanor placed the earpiece in her ear. It felt cold. "I'm not afraid of Silas Vance," she lied. "You should be," Julian muttered. At that moment, the heavy oak doors of the restaurant swung open. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. 2 massive bodyguards walked in, followed by a man in a wheelchair. He was skeletal, with skin like parchment and dark sunglasses covering his eyes. He was pushed by a woman in a red dress who looked like a movie star, but had the dead eyes of an assassin. "Showtime," Julian whispered. "Don't screw this up, Elena." Eleanor watched the man in the wheelchair approach. Silas Vance, the man who had allegedly helped Julian frame her father. She took a sip of the wine. It tasted like blood and money. "I won't screw it up, Julian," she thought. "I'm going to burn you to the ground." The arrival of Silas Vance was not just an entrance, it was a localized weather event. As his wheelchair rolled silently across the plush carpet, the air in L'Obsidian seemed to thicken, becoming harder to breathe. The ambient chatter of the restaurant didn't just fade, it was strangled. Silas Vance was a man who had allegedly not left his penthouse at the Dakota in 5 years. The tabloids speculated he was dead. The financial blogs claimed he was running a shadow government from a hyperbaric chamber. Seeing him here, in the flesh, was like seeing a ghost. If ghosts wore Italian silk suits, worth more than most cars. He was stopped at the head of the table. The woman in red, stunning, severe, with hair pulled back so tight it pulled at her eyes, locked the wheels of the chair. She didn't look at Julian. She didn't look at Elena. She pulled a heavy leather folder from a bag and placed it on the table. "Silas," Julian said, his voice steady, though Elena could see the vein in his neck pulsing against his collar. "I didn't think you'd come in person. I thought you'd send your dogs." The man in the wheelchair didn't move. His head was lolled slightly to the right. His eyes were hidden behind the black lenses of his sunglasses. His hands, resting on the knees of his trousers, were covered in age spots and trembling with a rhythmic, Parkinsonian tremor. "Mr. Vance does not speak to desperate men," the woman in red said. Her voice was ice water. "I am Isabella Vance. I speak for my father." "Isabella," Julian nodded, acknowledging her but keeping his eyes on the old man. "It's been a long time. Since the Hamptons, I believe. You were friendlier then." "That was before you tried to bankrupt my family, Julian," Isabella replied, taking the seat opposite Marcus's vacant spot. She didn't even glance at Eleanor. To her, Eleanor was just part of the furniture, a decorative piece Julian had acquired for the evening. Eleanor sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. Through the earpiece, she heard the frantic typing of Julian's analyst team back at his headquarters. "Sir!" A tinny voice buzzed in Eleanor's ear. "Facial recognition confirms it is Silas, but thermal imaging suggests his body temperature is lower than average. He's heavily medicated. He might not be cognitively present." Elena watched Silas. She watched the tremor in his hands. It was rhythmic. Too rhythmic. "Let's cut the pleasantries," Isabella said, opening the leather folder. "You want the lithium rights to the basin? You need them to satisfy the debt covenants with BlackRock. If you don't get the rights signed over by midnight, your liquidity dries up, and your stock tanks at the opening bell tomorrow. Am I missing anything?" "You're missing the part where your father needs my infrastructure to mine it," Julian countered, leaning back. "Vance Corp has the land, but you don't have the tech. You haven't updated your extraction protocols since the 90s. Without me, that lithium stays in the ground." "We have other offers," Isabella said smoothly. "Musk is interested. So are the Chinese. Musk won't deal with your father's regulatory baggage, and the Committee on Foreign Investment will block the Chinese. I'm the only buyer, Isabella, and you know it." Elena watched the old man, Silas Vance, the man whose signature was on the documents that framed her father. She felt a surge of bile rise in her throat. She wanted to pick up the steak knife and plunge it into the table. But she had a job to do. Sabotage. She needed Julian to trust her implicitly so that when the critical moment came, she could guide him off the cliff. "The offer on the table is $4 billion, Julian said. "Cash and stock." Isabella laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. $4 billion? For the largest lithium deposit in North America? "You're insulting us, Julian. The price is $6 billion, and we want a controlling interest in the joint venture. 60% to Vance Corp." 60%? Julian slammed his hand on the table again. "That leaves me with nothing. I need 51% to consolidate the earnings. If I take a minority stake, my investors will walk." "Then let them walk," Isabella said, closing the folder. "Those are the terms. Take it or leave it. You have 10 minutes. The table fell into a heavy silence. Julian looked at Elena. His eyes were desperate. "Help me!" His expression screamed. Elena looked at Isabella. Then she looked at Silas Vance. She saw it. It was small, almost imperceptible. But it was there. Silas Vance's right hand was trembling, but when the waiter approached to pour water into Isabella's glass, the water splashed slightly. Isabella flinched, and for a split second, less than a heartbeat, Silas Vance's hand stopped trembling. His finger tapped the armrest of the wheelchair. Once, twice. It was a signal. Elena realized with a jolt that the old man wasn't as out of it as he pretended. He was listening. He was directing Isabella. And he was nervous. Why would he be nervous if he held all the cards? "Tell me what you see," Julian whispered to Eleanor, pretending to lean in to check her menu. Eleanor leaned in close, her lips brushing his ear. She smelled his cologne, sandalwood and cold, hard cash. "He's not asleep," Eleanor whispered. "And he's not sick. At least, not as sick as he's acting." "What?" Julian hissed. "His hand," Eleanor murmured. "He stopped shaking when the water spilled. It's an act. He's controlling the room. And Isabella, look at her neck." Julian glanced at Isabella. "She's sweating," Eleanor whispered. "Just at the hairline. She's terrified. They don't have another buyer, Julian. If they had Musk or the Chinese lined up, they wouldn't be here at 9 p.m. on a Friday trying to strong-arm you. They're desperate. They need this deal as much as you do." "Are you sure?" Julian asked, searching her eyes. This was it. The moment of truth. If Eleanor told him the truth, he would push back and win. If she lied, if she told him they looked confident, he would fold, accept the bad deal, and eventually lose his company when the debt crushed him. It would be so easy to lie. "They look solid, Julian. Take the deal." But looking at Silas Vance, that fraudulent, evil old man hiding behind dark glasses, Elena felt a different kind of hatred. Silas Vance had destroyed her father, too. Silas Vance was the one who had allegedly provided the false bank records. If she let Julian lose now, Vance won, and she couldn't stomach the idea of Silas Vance winning. "I'm sure," Elena said, making a snap decision. She would save Julian now, only to destroy him later on her own terms. She wouldn't let Vance take the kill. "Crush them." Julian pulled back. He looked at her for a long second, then turned to Isabella. A cold, shark-like smile returned to his face. "No," Julian said. Isabella blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said no. 6 billion is a fantasy, and 60% is a joke. My offer stands at 4 billion. But now the terms have changed. I want 70%, and I want Silas off the board of directors." Isabella's face went white. "We're leaving." She stood up and grabbed the handles of the wheelchair. "Sit down, Isabella," Julian barked. "If you walk out that door, I call the EPA tomorrow morning and tell them about the groundwater contamination reports you've been hiding in the Nevada site survey. Yes, I know about that. My analysts found it 10 minutes ago." Isabella froze. Her hands gripped the wheelchair so hard her knuckles turned white. Silas Vance's head lifted. Just an inch. "Sit down," Julian repeated, softer this time. Isabella slowly sat back down. The power in the room had shifted so violently the air felt thin. "Good," Julian said. "Now let's talk about reality." The negotiations dragged on for another hour. Courses of food came and went, untouched. A risotto aux truffes went cold. A filet mignon congealed on the plate. The only thing being consumed was the patience of everyone involved. Elena sat in the eye of the storm. She played her part perfectly. Every time Isabella tried to pivot or bluff, Elena would tap Julian's foot under the table or whisper a single word of guidance. She was reading Isabella's micro-expressions like a book. The flare of a nostril meant a lie. The touching of the necklace meant insecurity. Julian was destroying them. He had beaten them down from 6 billion to 3.8 billion. He had secured 55% control. It was a masterclass in corporate warfare, and Elena was the secret weapon. Finally, Isabella threw her pen down. She looked defeated. She looked like a child who had been scolded. "Fine," she whispered. 3.8 billion. 55%. We sign tonight. Julian exhaled, a long, shuddering breath of relief. He looked at Elena, and for the first time, His guard dropped completely. His eyes shone with genuine gratitude. "We did it," he mouthed. "Get the papers," Julian said to his lawyer, who had materialized from the shadows of the bar area. As the documents were being spread out on the table, pushing aside the untouched wine glasses, the atmosphere relaxed slightly. The war was over. Or so they thought. "One condition," a voice croaked. It sounded like dry leaves being crushed under a boot. It was a voice unused to speaking. Everyone froze. They turned to the head of the table. Silas Vance had removed his sunglasses. His eyes were milky white, surrounded by red, irritated rims. But they were sharp. They were terrifyingly intelligent. He was looking directly at Julian. "Silas," Julian said, surprised. "You can speak." "I can do many things," Silas rasped. He lifted a hand, steady now, no tremor at all, and pointed a gnarled finger at Julian. "I will sign your deal, Julian. I will give you your lithium. I will save your empire." "Okay," Julian said slowly. "What is the condition?" Silas shifted his gaze. He didn't look at Isabella. He didn't look at the lawyers. He looked at Elena. "I want her," Silas said. Elena's blood ran cold. The room seemed to spin. "Excuse me?" Julian laughed nervously. "This is Eleanor. She's on my staff. She's not for sale, Silas. This isn't the Middle Ages." "I don't want to buy her," Silas sneered, his lips curling back to reveal yellowed teeth. "I want to talk to her. Alone. 5 minutes. Outside." "Why?" Julian demanded, his protective instinct suddenly flaring up. "She's a waitress, Silas. What business do you have with her?" Silas Vance leaned forward, the wheelchair creaking. "Because," Silas whispered, his voice carrying a weight that crushed the air out of Eleanor's lungs. "She looks exactly like her father." The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavier than the silence when Eleanor had shouted at Julian. This was the silence of a bomb having just detonated, and the dust suspended in the air before the shockwave hit. Elena stopped breathing. She gripped the edge of the table so hard her fingernails dug into the wood. "He knows." Julian looked from Silas to Elena. He frowned, confusion clouding his features. "Her father? What are you talking about?" "Look at her, Julian," Silas wheezed. "Look past the cheap uniform. Look at the chin. Look at the eyes. You don't recognize her? You destroyed her family." Julian turned slowly to face Elena. He studied her face, really studied it, stripping away the context of the restaurant, the apron, the situation. "Elena," Julian asked softly. "Who are you?" Elena stood up. Her legs felt like lead. The game was up. There was no point in hiding anymore. The earpiece felt like a parasite in her ear. She ripped it out and dropped it into her wine glass. "My name," she said, her voice trembling, but gaining strength with every syllable, "is Eleanor Peterson. Arthur Peterson was my father." Julian recoiled as if she had slapped him. His face went pale. "Peterson? You... But Arthur's daughter was in law school. She dropped out," Eleanor said coldly. "When you framed her father for embezzlement and drove him to suicide, the money for law school kind of dried up." Julian looked horrified. "Eleanor, I didn't... Save it," she snapped. "Well, well, well," Silas Vance cackled, a dry, hacking sound. "The reunion is complete. Now, Julian, my condition stands. I want 5 minutes with the girl. If I get it, I sign the deal. If I don't, I burn the papers, and you lose everything by morning." Julian looked at the papers. He looked at his empire, his legacy, hanging by a thread. Then he looked at Eleanor, the daughter of the man he had ruined, the woman who had just saved his hide. "No," Julian said firmly. "What?" Silas stopped laughing. "I said no," Julian said, standing up to his full height. "She isn't a bargaining chip. I don't care who her father was. She helped me tonight. I'm not handing her over to you." "Then you lose everything," Silas roared, his voice surprisingly strong. "Fine," Julian roared back. "Keep the lithium, keep the mine, I'll find another way, but you get the hell out of my restaurant." Elena stared at Julian. She was stunned. He was choosing her, his enemy's daughter, a waitress, over a $4 billion deal. It didn't make sense. Julian Thorne was a monster. Monsters didn't do that. "You're a fool, Julian," Silas spat. "Just like Arthur was." "Wait," Elena said. Everyone looked at her. Elena looked at Silas Vance. She saw the glint in his milky eyes. He wasn't asking for a chat because he wanted to reminisce. He wanted to tell her something. Something that Julian wasn't supposed to hear. She realized suddenly that the dynamic at the table was a triangle, not a line. It wasn't Julian versus Vance. It was something else. "I'll do it," Elena said. "Elena, no." Julian grabbed her arm. "You don't know him. He's dangerous." "I'll be fine," Elena said, pulling her arm away. She looked at Julian with a mixture of confusion and grudging respect. "You stood up for me. Thank you. But I need to hear what he has to say." She walked around the table. Isabella stood up and unlocked the wheelchair brakes. 5 minutes, Elena said to Silas. "Outside on the terrace." Silas smiled. It was the smile of a spider welcoming a fly. "After you, Miss Peterson." Elena walked toward the terrace doors, the heavy glass parting to let in the cool New York night air. Silas rolled behind her, the electric motor of his chair humming. As the doors closed, sealing them off from the restaurant, the noise of the city rushed in. Sirens, honking cars, the hum of life. Elena walked to the railing and looked out at the city lights. She turned to face the old man. "Talk," she said. "Why did you want to see me?" Silas Vance stopped his chair. He reached into his jacket pocket. For a second, Elena thought he was pulling a gun. She tensed, ready to run. But he pulled out a photograph. It was old, battered, and stained with coffee rings. He held it out to her. Elena took it. She moved into the light of a heat lamp to see it. It was a photo of 3 men standing on a yacht, laughing, holding glasses of champagne. On the left was Julian Thorne, young and handsome. In the middle was Silas Vance, standing tall and strong. On the right was her father, Arthur Peterson. They looked like brothers. "What is this?" Elena asked. "The beginning," Silas said. 1998. We started the firm together, the 3 of us." "I know my father knew you," Elena said. "That's not news." "Do you know why your father died, Elena?" Silas asked softly. "Because Julian framed him," she spat. "Because Julian got greedy and planted the evidence of the embezzlement on Arthur's computer." Silas shook his head slowly. "No, child. Julian didn't frame your father." Elena froze. "What?" "Julian didn't frame Arthur," Silas whispered, leaning forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. "Arthur was guilty. He stole the money, Elena. He stole it to pay off gambling debts to the Russian mob." "Liar!" Elena shouted. "My father was a good man." "Your father was a desperate man," Silas corrected. Julian tried to cover it up. He tried to pay the debt himself to save Arthur. But the SEC got wind of it. Julian took the public heat, acted the villain, to protect Arthur's reputation. To protect you. Elena felt the ground sway beneath her feet. "That's impossible. Julian hates him. He talks about him with such disdain." "It's an act," Silas said. "Julian Thorne is many things, arrogant, ruthless, ambitious. But he loved your father. He never framed him. He tried to save him." "Then why are you telling me this?" Elena asked, tears stinging her eyes. "Why now? Why ruin your leverage?" Silas smiled again. This time it was truly evil. "Because, my dear," Silas said, "I'm the one who framed him." Elena stopped breathing. "I cooked the books," Silas whispered, his face glowing demonically in the red light of the heat lamp. "I stole the money. I blamed Arthur. and I let Julian take the fall for being the bad guy while I walked away with the cash. And tonight, I'm going to finish the job." "Why are you telling me?" Elena gasped, backing away toward the railing. "Because," Silas said, reaching for a button on the armrest of his wheelchair, "no one will ever believe a grief-stricken waitress who, accidentally, fell off the balcony of a penthouse restaurant." The wheelchair lunged forward with a mechanical whine. The mechanical whine of the wheelchair motor was the sound of a nightmare. It was high-pitched, electric, and relentless. Elena scrambled backward, her heels skidding on the polished limestone of the terrace floor. She hit the railing with a bone-jarring thud. The metal was cold against her back, and behind her there was nothing but a sheer 60-story drop to the grid of Manhattan streets below. Silas Vance didn't look frail anymore. His face was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated malice. His hand was jammed down on the joystick of the wheelchair, driving the heavy, reinforced footrests directly toward Elena's shins. "You should have stayed hidden, little girl," Silas hissed over the wind. "You should have changed your name and moved to Idaho. But you had to come back. You had to serve me wine." "Get away from me," Elena screamed, grabbing the metal railing with both hands, trying to hoist herself up, trying to find leverage. But the wheelchair was heavy, custom-built, armored, probably weighing 300 pounds. Silas pinned her legs against the bottom of the railing. The metal groaned. The railing shuddered. Arthur screamed too, Silas taunted, pushing the joystick forward. The torque of the motor pressed harder, crushing Elena's legs. The railing began to bend outward. "He begged me to stop. He told me he had a daughter. I told him that was his problem, not mine." Elena cried out in pain as the pressure on her shins became unbearable. She looked over her shoulder. The drop was dizzying. The cars looked like toys. If the railing gave way, she would be gone in seconds. "Die," Silas whispered. Crash. The glass doors to the terrace exploded outward. It wasn't a polite opening. It was a shattering impact. A heavy iron chair from the dining room flew through the glass, sending shards raining down like diamonds. Silas jerked his head around. Julian Thorne came through the broken door like a dark blur. He wasn't the composed billionaire anymore. He was a force of nature. His jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up, his eyes burning with a terrifying rage. "Get away from her!" Julian roared. Silas tried to reverse the wheelchair, his hand fumbling for the controls, but he was too slow. Julian didn't stop running. He lowered his shoulder and slammed into the side of the heavy wheelchair with the force of a linebacker. The impact was sickening. The wheelchair tipped onto two wheels. Silas shrieked, a high, thin sound, as the chair toppled over, spilling the old man onto the hard stone floor. Elena slumped to the ground, gasping for air, clutching her bruised legs. The pressure was gone, but the terror remained. "Elena!" Julian scrambled over to her, ignoring the glass slicing into his palms. He grabbed her face, his hands shaking. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" He killed my father," Elena sobbed, the adrenaline crash hitting her all at once. "He admitted it, Julian. It was him." Julian's face hardened. He looked over at Silas, who was struggling to crawl toward the door like a broken insect. The wheelchair lay on its side, wheels spinning uselessly in the air. "I know," Julian whispered. "I suspected, but I never had proof." Julian stood up. He walked toward Silas Vance. Silas flipped onto his back, holding up his trembling hands. "Stay back! I'll sue you! I'll buy this building and evict you! I am Silas Vance!" "You're a murderer," Julian said, his voice deadly calm. He reached down, grabbed Silas by the lapels of his expensive suit, and hauled the old man off the ground. "Isabella!" Silas screamed. "Isabella, help me!" As if summoned, the woman in the red dress appeared in the shattered doorway. But she wasn't alone. She was holding a silenced pistol. "Put him down, Mr. Thorne," Isabella said. Her voice was steady. She held the gun with professional ease, aimed directly at Julian's chest. Julian froze. He held Silas up as a shield, but the old man was too small to cover him completely. "You won't shoot," Julian said, narrowing his eyes. "Not here. Not with witnesses. There are 50 people inside that restaurant." "They are busy hiding under the tables," Isabella said coldly. "And the staff has been encouraged to leave the kitchen. Drop my father. Now." Julian hesitated. He looked at Elena, huddled by the railing. If he dropped Silas, Isabella might shoot them both. If he didn't, she would definitely shoot him. "Let him go, Julian," Elena said, her voice trembling but clear. "It's not worth dying for." Julian ground his teeth. He glared at Silas, his eyes promising retribution. Then, with a shove of disgust, he threw Silas toward Isabella. Isabella caught the old man with one arm, keeping the gun trained on Julian. She dragged her father backward into the restaurant. "The deal is off," Isabella said, "and if you try to follow us, I will kill the girl first." They retreated through the dining room. Elena could hear the frantic shouts of Henri and the other staff in the distance, but no one dared approach the woman with the gun. Julian didn't move until the elevator doors chimed and slid shut. Only then did he sag, the tension leaving his body. He turned back to Eleanor. He offered her a hand. "Can you stand?" he asked gently. Eleanor looked at his hand, the hand of the man she had hated for 3 years, the hand she thought was stained with her father's blood. She took it. He pulled her up, and for a moment they stood close, the wind whipping Eleanor's hair around her face. "You saved my life," she said. "I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner," Julian replied. He looked at her legs. "We need to get you ice, and we need to get out of here. Vance isn't done. He'll send people." "He has the lithium," Elena said, panic rising again. "He won. You didn't get the signature." Julian looked at the city skyline. A strange, dark smile touched his lips. "He didn't win," Julian said. "He thinks he won. But he just started a war he can't afford." "What do you mean? You're bankrupt without that deal." "I have something better than money now," Julian said, looking deep into her eyes. "I have Arthur Peterson's daughter, and if you are half as smart as your father was, we can burn Silas Vance to the ground before the sun comes up." Elena wiped the tears from her face. She straightened her apron, though it was torn and dirty. "I'm smarter than my father," she said. "Good," Julian said. "Come with me." The penthouse of the Thorn Tower was a fortress of glass and steel floating above the clouds. It was stark, modern, and filled with servers that hummed with the quiet power of $1 billion in data. Elena sat on a white leather sofa, an ice pack strapped to her shin. She had changed out of her waitress uniform into a spare cashmere sweater and sweatpants Julian had given her. They were too big, swallowing her frame, making her look small and vulnerable. But her eyes were sharp. She was watching Julian pace back and forth in front of a wall of monitors. "My father," Elena said, breaking the silence. "Tell me the truth. The real truth." Julian stopped pacing. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Cheap stuff this time, not the Margot. He handed one to her. "Arthur was a genius," Julian began, sitting on the coffee table opposite her. "He built the algorithms that made our firm billions. But he had a vice, gambling, not just poker, high stakes, underground leverage betting. He got in deep with the wrong people, Russian syndicates." Elena gripped the glass. "Silas said he stole from the company." "He did," Julian nodded. "But he didn't do it for greed. He did it to keep them from hurting you. They threatened to kidnap you, Elena. Arthur was terrified. He siphoned $5 million from the accounts to pay them off." "And you knew?" "I found out too late. The SEC audits were already flagged." Silas saw an opportunity. He didn't just report the theft. He altered the records to make it look like Arthur had stolen 50 million. Silas took the extra 45 for himself and pinned it all on Arthur. And you took the blame, Elena whispered. Why? Because Arthur came to me the night before he jumped. He told me everything. He begged me not to let the world know about the Russians. He said if the syndicate knew he had talked, they would come for you. So I made a deal with the devil. I let the world think I was the negligent CEO who let it happen. I fired Arthur publicly to distance him from the firm, hoping the Russians would think the debt died with him. Elena felt a tear roll down her cheek. For 3 years, she had despised the only man who had actually tried to protect her. I hated you, she said. I know, Julian said softly. It was better that way. If you hated me, you stayed away. You stayed safe. But Silas knows now, Elena said. He knows who I am. Which means the gloves are off, Julian said. He stood up and walked to the massive server bank. Silas Vance thinks he has me cornered. He knows my loans are due on Monday. He knows I didn't get the lithium deal signed. He thinks I'll be liquidated, and he can buy my assets for pennies on the dollar. Won't he? Not if we find the ghost drive, Julian said. Elena frowned. The what? Arthur wasn't just a gambler, Elena. He was paranoid. He built a back door into the company servers, a dead man's switch. He told me that if anything ever happened to him, the evidence to clear his name, and the evidence of Silas's theft, was on a secure partition. But he never gave me the key. Julian turned to her. He said the key was safe at home. Elena's heart skipped a beat. Safe at home. She closed her eyes, thinking back to the day her father died. The police had raided their house. They had taken his computer, his files, his phone. They had turned the place upside down. The police took everything, Elena said. There was nothing left. Think, Elena, Julian urged. Arthur loved puzzles. He loved hiding things in plain sight. Was there anything he gave you? Anything he insisted you keep? Elena thought. She remembered the funeral. She remembered the empty casket because they hadn't found the body immediately. She remembered the box of personal effects the police had returned a month later. His watch, his wallet, and the chess piece, Elena whispered. Julian froze. What? A white queen, Elena said, her eyes widening. He gave it to me for my birthday, 2 days before he died. It was from an antique set we used to play with. He said, "The queen protects the king, Elena." Never forget that. Do you still have it? Julian asked, his voice intense. It's on my keychain, Elena said. I carry it everywhere. She reached for her purse, which she had salvaged from the restaurant. Her hands trembled as she dug through the contents. Lipstick, pens, tips from the night. And there it was. A heavy, ivory-carved chess piece attached to a simple silver ring. The White Queen. She held it up. Julian took it from her carefully. He held it under the light. It looks solid, he muttered. He twisted the base. It didn't move. He pulled on the head. Nothing. Maybe it's just a chess piece, Elena said, her hope fading. Arthur didn't do just anything, Julian said. He walked over to a microscope set up on a workbench in the corner. He placed the queen under the lens. Look, he said. Elena limped over and peered through the eyepiece. On the bottom of the chess piece, carved into the ivory and microscopic script, was a series of numbers. 199221168 points, row 1, and port 8080, a PWD, Elena wins. It's an IP address, Julian said, typing furiously on his keyboard. A local server. But where? Wait, Elena said, pointing at the screen. That IP, that's a local loopback for a specific type of legacy server, the kind Vance Corp still uses for their archive storage. Julian looked at her, impressed. You know servers? I spent 3 years trying to hack your company to find dirt on you, Eleanor admitted with a sheepish smile. I learned a few things. Julian laughed. It was a genuine, happy sound. Remind me to give you a job in IT if we survive this. He punched in the IP address. A black command prompt appeared on the giant wall screen. Enter. Password. Julian stepped back. Do the honors. Elena stepped forward. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. ELENA_WINS. She hit enter. The screen flashed green. Lines of code began to cascade down the monitor like a waterfall. Files, emails, bank transfer records, audio logs. My God, Julian whispered. It's everything. It's the ledger. The real ledger. He pointed to a column of numbers. Look at the dates. These transfers. They go directly from the company accounts to a shell company in the Caymans registered to Silas Vance. It proves he stole the money, Elena said, breathlessly. It clears my father. It does more than that, Julian said, a predatory grin returning to his face. Look at the timestamp on the last file. Elena looked. Today, 8:45 p.m. What is that? She asked. That, Julian said, is the geological survey for the Nevada lithium basin, the one Silas tried to hide. He opened the file. A map appeared, covered in red warning zones. Critical contamination. Warning: arsenic levels 500% above legal limit. Groundwater unstable. Mining impossible. Julian started laughing. He laughed so hard he had to lean on the desk. The mine is worthless, he gasped. The lithium is there, but you can't extract it without poisoning the water supply of 3 states. The EPA would shut it down in a week. So, Silas was selling you a lemon? He was trying to sell me a death sentence, Julian said. If I had signed that deal, I would have paid $4 billion for a pile of dirt that would have resulted in the biggest environmental lawsuit in history. It would have destroyed Thorn Enterprises forever. But you didn't sign, Elena said. No, Julian said, but Isabella thinks I'm desperate. She thinks I'm cornered. He turned to Elena, his eyes blazing with a plan. It's 2:08 a.m., Julian said. By Monday morning, Silas Vance is going to be in prison, and you, Elena Peterson, are going to be a very rich woman. How? We're going to leak this, Julian said. Not to the press? Not yet. To whom? To the buyers Silas mentioned, Julian said. The Chinese and Musk. We're going to send this report anonymously to every potential buyer Silas has. By sunrise, his $6 billion asset will be worth 0. And then, Julian picked up his phone. I'm going to make a call to the district attorney. I think she'll be very interested in the bank records your father saved. Elena looked at the screen, at the cascade of green code that was her father's legacy. He hadn't left her money. He had left her the truth. One more thing, Elena said. What? Isabella, Elena said coldly. She held a gun to you. She tried to kill us. Oh, don't worry, Julian said, dialing a number. I'm not calling the police for Isabella. Who are you calling? I'm calling the Russian syndicate, Julian said, his voice devoid of emotion. It turns out they're still looking for their $5 million. I think I'll tell them exactly where Silas Vance lives. The final battle wasn't fought in a boardroom, but across digital networks. By 6 a.m. Sunday, Elena and Julian had executed their plan. The Ghost Drive data, the undeniable proof of contamination in the Nevada lithium mine, was leaked anonymously to environmental agencies and rival corporations. Simultaneously, the real accounting ledger and Silas's damning audio confession were delivered to DA Olivia Sterling. At 7 a.m., the financial world began to crumble for one man. Vance Corp stock was halted pending an emergency investigation. The environmental catastrophe was now public knowledge, instantly rendering Silas Vance's multi-billion-dollar asset worthless. Julian's firm, Thorn Enterprises, stabilized. His refusal of the deal, once seen as recklessness, was now lauded as strategic foresight, giving his creditors the confidence to extend their deadlines. Julian's final, dark move was completed when a brief, cryptic confirmation arrived. Silas Vance and his enforcer, Isabella, were out of the picture, apprehended by the same syndicate Arthur Peterson had feared years ago. The threat to Elena was neutralized, and justice, brutal and swift, was served. At 9 a.m., Elena, now dressed in an expensive professional suit, stood beside Julian in the DA's office. She presented the final evidence that cleared her father's name completely. DA Sterling confirmed that Arthur Peterson would be posthumously exonerated. The real embezzler, Silas Vance, was facing life in prison and total asset forfeiture. That evening, back in the penthouse, Julian handed Elena her contract, $500,000, the full salary of a chief ethics officer, and most importantly, the 30% stake in Thorn Enterprises belonging to the Peterson estate. Elena was now a minority partner. "Why go through all this, Julian?" Elena asked, still grappling with the years of hatred she had carried. Julian looked out at the city lights. "Arthur and I planned for this. He knew Silas would come for him, and he knew you were the only one stubborn enough to find the truth." Julian confessed that when she shouted at him in the restaurant, his rage immediately turned to relief. "When you put that bottle down and said, 'Shout at me again and I'll end this conversation,' I didn't see a waitress, Eleanor. I saw Arthur's eyes. I recognized your fury. I knew the test was over, and you had passed." Julian hadn't hired her. He had been protecting her and waiting for the moment to pass the torch. He placed the White Queen chess piece in her hand. "Thorn Enterprises is moving into sustainable energy and ethical finance," he declared. "You have the ethics, I have the capital. We will turn the poisoned Nevada mine into a massive cleanup initiative, a worthy legacy for your father. Start by showing the world that even the help can change the narrative." Elena nodded, ready to build the empire she had helped save. This is the story of how an act of defiance in a silent, high-stakes dining room didn't just end a conversation. It brought down a financial titan and vindicated a dead man's memory. Elena Peterson, the waitress, used her sharp mind and fierce sense of justice to expose a 20-year-old corporate betrayal, revealing that the true villain was hiding in plain sight, and the man she hated, Julian Thorn, was her secret protector, running a years-long gambit to honor a promise to a dying friend. The line, "Shout at me again and I'll end this conversation," wasn't just a warning. It was the starting pistol for a final, high-stakes victory that shocked Wall Street and cemented her place among the most powerful new executives in Manhattan. If you loved the twists, the drama, and the ultimate victory of the underdog, please hit that like button and tell us in the comments. What was the most shocking reveal for you? Did you expect Julian was covering for Arthur all along? Share this story with a friend who loves a good corporate thriller. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the shocking true tales of power, money, and revenge.